Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Know it's been a minute since I've done a processing video, and finally got some time and some clear weather a couple weeks ago to shoot some new images for you. Here I have the California Nebula NGC 1499. It's a emission nebula located in the constellation Perseus, roughly 1,000 light years away. And I shot this image right here. This is 11 hours worth of 300-second exposures. With the Optilong L Extreme filter, so it's some narrowband data on used my ZWO ASI 2600 MC Pro one-shot color camera. It's always a mouthful. And then over here, these are 30-second exposures that are also shot with the ZWO 2600, but it's just with no filter installed in front, so it's an RGB images of just the stars. Now, the reason that we would try to shoot some RGB stars with our narrowband image is if you've ever processed or seen narrowband images, and while narrowband does bring out a lot of this hydrogen detail in the nebula here, the process leaves the stars looking very blue and very bland. So when we shoot RGB stars and put them in a narrowband image, it'll give us a nice kind of colorful pop back to our stars. So in order to do this, again, these photos here were taken on 2 separate nights. I'm going to first go to process and go to the star alignment tool so that I can align these images together so that they match. Now, for my purposes here, I'm going to use my reference image is going to be my narrowband image. So what I'm going to do is make sure that is selected as the reference image, and then once that's done, you're just going to drag this little triangle over to your RGB image. All right, now that that's done, we can put a little auto stretch on it. You can see that it's cropped out the image and has these black bars on it. Let me minimize the original here. Again, what that's done is made sure that these photos are both aligned. Now, what I'm going to need to do to get this to matching here, because now this image is basically shifted in the frame, I'm going to use, let me minimize it a little bit so I have a little bit more screen real estate. I'm going to use the dynamic crop feature here to crop out these black bars here. But then before I hit the green check mark, I'm going to drag this triangle here over to my narrowband image, and you'll see that'll give the same crop on both images when I finally hit execute here. So now they're basically both aligned and both cropped to the same frame. Now the next thing I'm going to do before I do any of the processing is I'm going to rotate these around real quick so they're in the proper orientation that I want. So I'll go to process, all processes, and go down to fast rotation. I just passed it, there we go. And I'm going to rotate these both 180 degrees. And so now if I get these windows the same size here, you can see that, except I've zoomed in on that one now. You can see now that how they're perfectly aligned up. The stars are here. So now I'm able to basically process both of these and then take the stars from this and place them in this image. To do that, I'll be using some of Bill Blanchen's scripts for RGB stars to narrowband, as well as some of his normalization scripts for processing these narrowband images. But I think I'm going to go ahead and work on my narrowband image first. So I'm just going to minimize my stars and put it up here with the original. And one of the first things I'm going to do is run a spectrophotometric color calibration to get this color calibrated here. So I'll open up SPCC. Now I'm going to have to plate solve this image so that I can get the proper color data and everything for the color calibration. So to do that, we're going to go to Script, Image Analysis, Image Solver. We're going to hit Search, and we're going to look up NGC 1499. Hit the Search button here. That'll bring up the California Nebula. We'll hit OK. And then we'll hit OK again. Now that that's done, I'm going to keep on the spectrophotometric color calibration window here. I'm going to keep this as average spiral galaxy. I'm going to switch my quantum efficiency curve, this QE curve, down to the proper Sony sensor. In my drop-down menu here, I'm going to select for my filter the L Extreme data, or rather the L Extreme filter for my red, green, and the blue. And then what I'm going to do is background neutralize this. So I'm going to zoom in to an area where there's no nebulosity or stars, and just take a quick preview window here by selecting this button up here and just getting a tiny little square of some background. So we want to get this image properly background neutralized. We will select region of interest from preview and make sure it's that preview. So we'll hit OK, and then we'll drag and drop. All right, now that that's done, we can see it's removed that green background from the narrowband image. We'll get rid of this stretch and put in a new auto stretch. And now I can see a little bit of a gradient here in kind of the center and corner. So what I'm going to do is use automatic background extractor here, and that'll get rid of that gradient. Let me zoom back out here. For the ABE, automatic background extractor, I have my function degree down here in the interpolation and output set to 1. And then make sure under your target image correction, you have correction set to subtraction. And normally you could use the discard background model, have that selected. But I'm going to just deselect it here so I can show you what gradient it pulls out of this image. So you can see here, you can see how it pulled that kind of that red gradient out of the image, and you can see the difference here when I add an auto stretch to it. A little bit more flatter image across the board. So I'm going to move my original up here. I always like to keep my originals kind of tucked away here just in case I may need them later. I'm going to shrink this a little bit so I have a little bit more screen real estate. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is use the Blur Exterminator plugin. It works really, this is a paid plugin, but it works really well to kind of deconvolute your stars, make your stars smaller, and bring more detail out in the nebula itself. So for that, I leave everything just as is, the default settings, and we'll just drag and drop that over. Now if we see here, I'll do a before and after. See how it made the stars a little bit more pinpoint and smaller. Just kind of helps bring out that nebula in the image and also keep some nice stars in the image as well. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is stretch this image so that we can continue to process it. Here, this is one of the newer processes that I've actually been using for the longest time. I use the Easy Processing Suite stretching, but now with the PixInsight updates, Easy Processing Suite no longer works. I also often use the histogram transformation tool to get my stretching, but I find Bill Blanchen's processes here work really well, make things very easy. And you can stretch these. There's multiple ways in PixInsight to stretch an image out for editing, but you know, taking these star pics takes long enough as it is. So any kind of process that can kind of shorten your processing time for me is great to have. So all we're going to do with that is it's a pixel math expression basically that he created, and we're just going to drag and drop this on here. And we're going to be using we use the unlinked stretch, if I remember correctly, because it's a narrowband image. You're going to want to use the unlinked stretch, and if it's a RGB image, you can use the linked stretch. I don't remember exactly why, but I just kind of remember it that way. And if you look here, you can see that that's now my stretch image. It's got a good, it's not overly contrasty. It's just kind of a good, nice like median stretch. It looks really good. So the next thing I'm going to do is pull out these stars here because I'm not going to be using them anyway. So I'm going to use the Star Exterminator tool. Now that we've got the stars removed, we can see here this beautiful California nebula here. It's just got just the nebula here itself. And here's my narrowband stars. Again, look at them. You can see kind of how blue they are. There's not a lot of like orange and colors in them and everything. You're just kind of blue and bland. In fact, I don't even need these anymore, so I'm just going to get rid of them. What I'm going to do next is use Bill's HOO normalization script here. And again, he's got a really good video explaining the different settings you can do here by increasing, different numbers here and how that will relate to your final image. And I play with it a little bit off camera, and I find, for at least for what I'm looking for, just using this default setting here works great. But again, check out his channel and it'll give you really good insight on how to use these tools. So we're just going to drag and drop this over here. All right, now that that's done, you can see it's created this nice, beautiful false color image. We're going to fix the saturation and stuff here in a little bit. But there is one thing that I want to address. And if you can see here that there is a halo here on one of these bright stars. And that's kind of one of the side effects of using a Optilong L Extreme filters, that on bright stars it will create a halo. But luckily on this one we're able to fix that using the clone stamp tool. So what we're going to do here is, I already know that this star has a radius of roughly 70 here. So I'll just enter 70. And on a Mac, we'll need to hit Command and find an area that we can basically erase this image with. So I'm going to find a reference area here and hit Command and press click my mouse here. And then I'm able to kind of just paint over that. And you can see here, it's almost like it was never there. And if you didn't know any better, you probably wouldn't notice it if I zoomed out. So we'll zoom all the way out. And yeah, it's fixed that halo. So now that when we bring the stars in, it won't have that beautiful RGB stars there and then have that ugly halo around it. So we'll just need to make sure when you're done, hit execute. And with that, you're done with using the clone stamp process. So now I'm going to continue to work on the color here on my narrowband data. So I'm going to bring up the curves transformation tool. I like using this one to edit my colors with. I'm going to make sure my preview selected by hitting this circle. And we're going to make sure the saturation tab over here is selected. We're going to come here in the middle of this curve here and bring up the saturation. We don't want to do too much because then we're going to kind of oversaturate the image and it'll look too muddy. But we just want to kind of subtly bring it up some so we can bring some of those colors in. And I'm liking about right there for now. We'll hit the square button to give it to bring it over to the image. We're going to reset the process here by selecting this button. I'm going to bump it up just a little bit more, just bring a little bit more color back into it. But again, not too much. Now, that's really brought up the saturation quite a bit, although I can tell there's a lot of blue here in the shadows. So the easiest way to get rid of that and kind of color balance your image, because normally if you've watched some of my processing videos before, I'll bring this into Photoshop and use the color balance tool, but here's another way that we can do it as well. We're going to make sure we've got the right image selected here. And then we can go to the blue channel here. And if let me make sure my preview window's up first. And if we crush these blues here and bring them back down here in the shadows, you can see that we can get rid of some of that blues. You just want to make sure that you're not clipping any of your shadows here. So I just want to bring them down just a little bit, not a bunch, just a little bit here. So it's good for now. It's still got a little bit of blue in the image, but that in the shadows, but that's okay. We can kind of fix a little bit more of that later. It's just not overdone. Next thing I'm going to use is the color masks here. Those are also from Bill Blanchard, and the color mask will allow me to kind of selectively edit the specific colors that you choose here. So for example, I want to give this yellow here of the California Nebula, I want to give it a little bit more kind of reddish color and give it a little bit more saturation without affecting the overall image. So I'm going to drag my yellow mask over here. And this is going to create a mask of just the yellow here, kind of this yellow gold here in the image. As you can see, we're going to add a mask blur so it kind of feathers out our edit. And we're just going to take this mask here and drag it below so that we have now, the red means that it's masked over. We can minimize this for now. I'm then going to, because I don't want this red visible, I'm going to select mask and just hide the mask here. I'm going to go back to my curves transformation, bring it back up, bring up my preview window. And what I want to do is just bring up a little bit more red into this, the kind of the clouds here. Not too much because then it starts to get too kind of burnt orange color. Just want a little bit of red. And you can play with it however you like here, but I might bring just a smidge of green in there. It's going to kind of turn this a little bit more white. And then if I drop the blues, it's going to make it more of a kind of a gold color here. So just play with that and see. It's ultimately up to you how you want your image processed. But I kind of like that right there. Kind of balances the image out. We're going to hit square button and that'll transfer it over. Looks pretty good. So now that I'm done editing that, I can remove my mask just by hitting mask and remove mask. And now I want to add a little bit more saturation, I think, now that I've done that overall to the image. So we'll make sure we hit on the saturation tab and just bump that up just a little bit more. I can also go here on the blues, and since there's a little bit of blues in the shadows, I can drop that down just a little bit as well. Maybe mess with the green a little bit to get rid of some of that green. Again, this is all up to you how you want to process the image. And then I may even select the RGBK here, and that's going to give me, like, I can add contrast, a little bit more contrast, and drop that, kind of crush the shadows a little bit more. Might do that just a little bit more. All right, there we go. I'm pretty happy with that. It looks good. Doesn't look too muddy or anything like that. The last thing I'm going to do before I start processing my RGB stars is I'm going to go to Script, Utilities, and go to the Dark Structure Enhance script here. And what this will do is kind of bring a little bit more contrast in the clouds of the nebula here, if you will. I've always just left this as its original settings here and just hit OK. And if we do a before and after, again, a before and after, we can see how that added a little bit more contrast and detail kind of onto the edges of the cloud. So it looks really nice. So now that we're done with my narrowband image here, I'm just going to minimize it and set it aside. And we'll start working on the RGB stars image. All right, for the RGB stars image, we're going to do this. We'll basically do a lot of the same processes. So the first thing I'm going to do is go to Script, Image Analysis, Image Solver, and get an asymmetric solution on this image here. So we will search again for NGC 1499, the California Nebula. Hit OK. Just hit OK again. And all right, now that that's done, we will go to SPCC. We're going to leave all of this as the default settings here. I'm going to zoom in and find us an area that we know doesn't have any stars or nebulosity. So there's a good image here. Hit this preview button and make a little preview window of that. Let's just find an area right here. Select region of interest from preview. Hit OK. We'll drag this over. All right, now that's done, we can remove the original stretch, bring back, put an auto stretch on it. And you can see here on this RGB image, since there's no filter, you can see it's a little bit easier to see the gradient. Again, you're going to remove that using the automatic background extractor. Just drag and drop that over here. We'll run a quick auto stretch on it, and that'll give us our gradient free image here. Minimize this one, put it back up there. I'm going to next run Blur Exterminator. Again, default settings, just drag and drop. All right, that turned out nice. Now, instead of using the unlinked stretch, or the linked stretch here rather. Now, what I'm going to do now is use the link stretch to get a stretched image of this image here so we can edit the stars. All right, now I'm going to use the Bill Blanchen's link stretch here to stretch this image out. And there you have it here. You can see that it's stretched out just the stars. And again, we're just going to be using the stars for this. So actually what I'm going to do now is use Star Exterminator, and I'll kind of explain as I go here. I want to add a little bit more color saturation to just the stars only because I'm not concerned about using this Nebula data from this RGB image. So I am going to extract the stars out real quick. I'm going to change the identifier as Nebula. Okay. And the identifier here on this image as stars. Now what I'm going to do on here is bring up my curves transformation tool, open my preview window, and I'm going to add a little bit more saturation to my stars here. And as you can see, these orange stars here are starting to give a little bit more color, and detail to them. I'm also going to pull out a little bit of the green, and that's going to bring kind of some of that color back into the stars here. You see, not too much, but there we go. All right, now that that's done, I'm actually going to blend these photos back together using pixel math. It's really simple. You're just going to type in Nebula plus stars, and then create new image. And there it has. It's created us a new image of the stars together, so we can actually just get rid of these two right here. So now that I've got my stars kind of edited, my RGB images edited just for the stars, we can blend these two together using Bill's process. All right, now I'm ready to add my RGB stars into my starless narrowband image here. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be using Bill Blanchen's RGB to stars script. Again, I'll link his video down below on how to use that. But basically, it's got these processes here that you want to make sure that you have your starless narrowband image named starless narrowband, and your starless RGB image named starless RGB. And then what you're going to do is drag the process onto your your RGB image here. And what that'll do is create our narrowband image with the RGB stars. And there you have it. You can see it's created our RGB image and combined those, or rather, redo. And there you go. You can see it's created our narrowband image with the RGB stars here. You can zoom in a little bit and you can see how the stars have more of a white color, but that there's still plenty of stars with some nice orange color in them. Now what I'm going to do is, since there's a little bit of noise, if you zoom in here, I'm going to fix that using the processes, go into all processes, and then Go down here to noise exterminator. And then I'm going to leave everything on, I'm going to not leave it on the default. I'm going to drop down to about 60 for this image and drag it and drop over here. And that'll clean this image up a little bit, some of that noise. If we zoom in here, we can see kind of the difference that it made. See all that kind of that noise there? It's kind of gotten rid of it. Looks really good. So now the last thing I'm going to do is, it's still a little bit blue in the shadows there, kind of in the space. So I'm going to bring up my histogram tool, make sure the right window is selected here. I'm going to make sure that I'm on the blue, and I'm going to, and that my preview is up, and I'm going to kind of adjust the color just a little bit more. I don't want all the blue, but if I can kind of match it a little bit, that'd be great. So let's drop it down. There we go. We can maybe even mess with the greens a little bit. Here's how you can kind of color balance your image. There we go. I think that's pretty good right there. All right, I really like that image, and I think the last thing that I'm going to do here is just add a smidge more, pull up the curves transformation tool, just a smidge more of saturation here, just to kind of bring kind of a nice poppy image here. Don't want too much, just want just a little bit there. There we go. I think I'm pretty happy with that. We can zoom in here. There's not too much noise. A little bit of noise on the blue because with one-shot color cameras, when I was not getting as much oxygen signal, but overall pretty good. Especially in here where we've got a lot of hydrogen signal here. It turned out really good and clean. So yeah. So there you go. That's how you put in RGB stars into a narrowband image. And that was my, processing video on the California Nebula. Hope you enjoyed the video. Hope it helps you out. If you have any questions, you can leave them down below. Comments, concerns, anything like that, please do. And if you haven't yet, I suggest you subscribe. I've got a lot more images that I need to edit that I shot here over the fall. We're just now kind of getting some good clear weather. Had a little bit of rain earlier this year, so I'm kind of now just getting to add to my data collection. So anyways, guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next video.